Welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. Here are the top 10 evil prisoners who were released early. Okay, dark one. Kicking off the list at number 10, Ayham Kartal. One of the worst when it comes to Turkey serial killers. His nickname is Izmir the Monster. He sexually assaulted and then killed young women in the mid-80s, but once he was checked into a mental hospital, he was either released or he escaped multiple times. This guy did this multiple times, and then once he was out, he would then repeat said disgusting crimes. He would leave, somebody horribly, and then be sent back. It was a broken system that clearly was not working for anybody. He shouldn't have been released at any point, nor should he have been able to escape. But after an escape in 2000, he was caught, and then something bizarre happened. I had to start this list off with this one. This is what happens when two evil humans cross paths. He was killed by somebody else on this list, who I'll mention later on. Yeah, we got a crazy one today. This is the darkest list I've ever done on this channel. Number 9. Adnan Colak. Yeah, fair warning, this is a dark list. After that first one, you're probably like, okay, I see. Some dark history coming in hot. This Turkish serial killer is responsible for taking the lives of 11 women who were all between the ages of 68 and 95, older women. He was also responsible for 6 other crimes that were also against elderly women. Just horrible theme going on here. It's disgusting. Now, down the road, he eventually did get caught for these horrendous crimes. He then got 6 death sentences as well as 40 years in prison. I mean, yeah, right? I would hope that's the case here. Make it 80 years. Sure, doesn't matter at this point. Point is, see you never, pal. Bye. Now, this was back in 1995 when he was first sentenced, but cut to 2004, death penalty in Turkey was abolished, which now meant that in May 2005, one Adnan Colak was released from jail. His nickname is the Artvin Monster. Number 8. Wanlin, who started his life in jail in the early 1990s, and he was there as a result of human trafficking charges. You would think once inside, prisoners would have a tough time continuing their practice, but not Wanlin. No, he decided to try something new entirely. While in jail, he kicked off his own medical practice, and then in 1997, after a retrial, Hu was released from prison. Once released, Hu continued this medical practice that he had started behind bars, but I must remind you at this point, he's not a doctor. He was not a medical practitioner at all. He was just doing that in jail because you're just in jail. So for the next few years, Hu treated many people with this herbal remedy that actually contained sodium sulfate, which is very lethal. It is suspected that because of this, he ended up taking the lives of around 146 people. Hu was arrested again in 1999 and then was sentenced to 15 years in prison for practicing medicine without a license. Then 15 years later, he was released on good behavior. Yep, I said on good behavior. Shortly after his release in 2014, it's believed that he was responsible for another death, this time of a 22-year-old student. I believe people can change to a certain degree. This type of stuff, I mean, you can't just risk having these people in public. It's not fair. 146 lives? Come on, man. Number 7. Lainz Angels of Death. When you think of a group of Australian nurses, normally you would be at ease. Well, not in this case. In the early 80s, the 4th largest medical facility in Vienna had over 2,000 staff members, including 4 nurses: Waltraud Wagner, Maria Gruber, Irene Ladoff, and Stefania Meyer, all nicknamed the Angels of Death. They were all responsible for taking the lives of 49 patients. That is disgusting. Wagner used doses of morphine. They were this disgusting squad of nurses. They all worked together and helped each other achieve horrible crimes. They couldn't keep their mouths shut about their wrongdoings though, so thankfully somebody overheard them talking about their latest crime at a bar one night, and then in February 1989, all 4 of them were arrested as they all confessed to the killings. 2 of the 4, Meyer and Gruber, they got lighter sentences out of the 4. They got charged with manslaughter and were released a few years later. Cut to 2008, the other 2, Wagner and Ladoff, they were also released, and they have since changed their name. Number 6. Nikolai Dzhumagaliev. While some of these are prisoners who were released and then are now out possibly in your neighborhood, there's also cases like Nikolai, where a prisoner is released and then they immediately go back for horrible crimes and then they stay there, thankfully, hopefully. Back in 1979, Nikolai killed a woman midday in the streets of Kazakhstan. When he was arrested, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and subsequently given a lighter sentence after the fact. He got manslaughter, so then a year later, he was released back into said streets of Kazakhstan. After this point, it's no surprise that he continued to kill others. And in 1980, he invited a group of friends over and then began going absolutely nuts, and he took the life of one of them that day while everybody else ran out of the house. At that point, they arrested him and took him to a high security mental clinic. Thankfully, that's where he'll remain for life. Again, hopefully, but as we see on this list, things could change. Number 5. Sybrand Louis van Schoor. Just sounds like trouble right off the bat. That many names? Can't be good. Back in 1992, Louis was a security guard in Cape Town, South Africa. He's now known as one of the worst serial killers in all of South Africa, in all of history. It's pretty bad stuff. See, Louis would respond to silent alarms that were triggered on business grounds. He was a security guard. But instead of arriving and, handling the situation in any way that's normal, the former policeman would instantly just shoot to kill. No questions asked. That was it. He was convicted of killing 39 burglars. The families of the victims spoke up. This was, of course, lawless. This was cruel. So Louis was found guilty of 7 murders and 2 attempted. 12 years later, in 2004, Louis was released. Yep, could have seen that one coming, could ya? During a press conference, Louis said to the families and friends of my victims, "I apologize if my actions caused any hurt and discomfort." I like how he says if, okay? "I have done my time." Yeah, you actually didn't do your time, Louis. You did 12 out of 20. Your math is and so are you. Number 4, Ali Kaya. Nicknamed the baby-faced killer, Ali Kaya was convicted of 10 killings, but in 2012, the man was released after a report stated that he had a mental disorder, common theme in this list here. His next step at this point is perhaps everybody's worst nightmare. He immediately attacked those who had testified against him during his previous trial. He ended up taking the lives of 3 of those people and leaving 2 more injured. That's terrifying. He was recaptured, thankfully, in 2013. Thankfully, nobody else got hurt after his initial release. But remember that horrible guy that I mentioned at the very beginning of this list, Ayham Kartal? Well, when he was finally put back in that mental facility after escaping and killing over and over, this is the guy that ended up taking his life in jail. Yeah, Ali Kaya killed Ayham Kartal in jail in 2000. Small world, huh? Guess it's all about who you know. Number 3, Charlene Gallego. A match made in hell, it seems, this time around. Back in the late 70s, Charlene Gallego, alongside her twisted husband, Gerald, were the worst in Sacramento, California. They kidnapped and then later killed 10 victims. They kept them and abused them for a while before ultimately ending their life in a cruel way. It was really the most twisted situation you can imagine. Just absolutely disgusting people. Now, cut to 1984, Charlene pleads guilty to murder and receives 16 years. Gerald was waiting for execution at this point, but he died of cancer before meeting his demise. No comment. Charlene ended up getting out and moved to Fair Oaks, California, where she then changed her name and could be at the grocery store next to you. Number 2, Anthony Montwheeler. On January 9th, 2017, Anthony kidnapped and subsequently took the life of his ex-wife, Anita Harmon, in front of multiple witnesses. Disgusting. Now, after this horrible crime, he took police on a short high-speed chase, which sadly ended in a head-on collision between him and another vehicle, which also took the life of the driver of that vehicle, David Bates. Just the wrong place at the wrong time. Horrible stuff, right? Now, cut to 20 years prior, we're gonna go back a little bit, in 1996. It was at this time Anthony had been charged with kidnapping previous wife and their son at gunpoint, but during the trial, Anthony pled not guilty by reason of insanity, and he ended up having to avoid prison entirely, but was sentenced to remain under state jurisdiction for the maximum sentence, which at that time was 70 years. So for 20 years, he was held in a mental health facility, but 20 years is certainly not the 70, right? So how is he able to get out and commit these horrible crimes, you ask? Well, in late 2016, quite recently, just 1 month before these horrible other crimes unfolded that I started with, he sat in front of a state review board and admitted to them that he had been faking insanity the entire time after that long. He detailed about how he studied books on how people would behave and how his previous defense of hearing the voice of his late mother was entirely just made up. He even said, "I've been using the system and I'm done." Yeah, he just got tired of playing along with his own charade. Although a forensic psychologist found him to be a high-risk offender, a psychiatrist from the facility that he stayed at testified that he showed no signs of mental illness and had been off medications for a year. This would make sense considering he's admitting to no mental illness, but does that mean that he's not a high-risk individual? He ended up being released from the facility, and the guy didn't even have to serve a prison sentence, and then this is what led him to ultimately being able to unfortunately commit these atrocious acts on January 9th, 2017, that head-on collision. Number 1, Karla Homolka. Being a Canadian, it's hard not to end on such a grim personal note here. In the early 90s, Karla Homolka and her husband, Paul Bernardo, they had done horrible things to at least 3 women. They killed 3 women, one of which was Karla's sister, Tammy. Horrible stuff. See, Karla had offered her own sister as some sort of gift to Paul. How disgusting and crazy is that? So when Bernardo was arrested in 1993, that's when Karla told officials that she was actually forced to be involved in said killings. Although later footage that was released would determine otherwise. She wasn't necessarily on board, apparently she was forced to comply. Okay, sure. So with that, she got a plea deal for testifying against Paul, therefore receiving 12 years. Cut to 2007, she's out. Now she has 2 kids, she's fully remarried, and she even volunteers with other parents at a school in Montreal. One woman spoke out, as I'm sure many do on a daily basis, but she said to Breakfast Television on air, "We don't want her here. How would you feel knowing that your child is interacting with a person who is a serial killer? It's not right." I have to agree. What are your thoughts on this whole situation? Sound off below. below. I mean, I personally wouldn't be in the same town as Karla Homolka, if I'm being honest. If I'm being honest, Toronto is too close for comfort. Like, I'm gonna go move more west. Those are the top 10 evil prisoners who were released early. If you want to hear 10 more, I'll get dark and dirty. I don't know. Don't make me do it. I've been your host, Taylor McWaters. I'll see you next time for a dark one.